Well, I wasn't going to do a video on this, but I decided I'd go ahead and do it. This is a little Emerson that I got in, and it's a little 5 tube, you know, all American 5 radio from I don't know, early 40s, maybe late 30s, I'm not real sure. I know the newer one said Emerson Radio and Television. This one says Emerson Radio and Phono Corporation. This one looks like it's had a really rough life. I do have the loop antenna. Yeah, it's got a big hole in where it was mounted. Somebody put a bread tie thing on here to hold it on. Let's see if I can find something a little better than that. So here it is, rotten power cord and all. I pulled the chassis a little while ago and someone had, this is just sitting in here loose. I didn't know the cabinet was cracked like that. They didn't tell me that when I was looking at it. But anyway, so the power cord's pretty shot, so first things first, I need to get that replaced. And it did have one knob on it. Don't know if I'll be able to find another one or not. The handle's gone off the top. This one's had a rough life. And someone looks like they've rigged up the speaker in here. I'm not sure if this, I don't even know what the model number of this radio is, so it was really going to be tough to try to figure out. I may have to get online and look at some pictures of radios and see if I can spot it. But the speaker in this thing has a field coil in it, which is not typical for an AA5 radio. So I may need to see if I can try and locate a schematic for it and find out if that's, you know, that field coil is original or what, because I don't know, I have a sneaking suspicion it's not. I don't know why this type of radio would need a field coil, but it may. If it's 30s, they may have been getting close to phasing them out or something, I don't know. But it's got all the octal tubes in it, so it's definitely got to be 40s, I would imagine, because the 50s I started phasing in the miniatures. They were still using octals, but the miniatures. So anyway, let me get this thing out and get the power cord replaced. So here's the chassis out of the cabinet, and this is the crap I'm talking about with the speaker. It's not even taped. Goes to the audio output transformer, but then mysteriously we have a field coil in the speaker. It's not all that big anyway. And then somebody put these bolts in here, which this side's not even attached. And you got this bolt here. This bolt, if you see between the tubes there, to hold the speaker in there. I think somebody just rigged up whatever they had. And you think they could at least put tape on there. So yeah, I'm not real sure what model this is. I'm gonna have to do some digging and see if I can figure out which one it is. And you got these capacitors here that literally the labels are coming off and it's separating. There's one capacitor in here up under here that doesn't even have, like, all the wax is melted out of it. The end is like there's no wax in it anymore. This one here. So and then they got some old Japanese capacitors, and I don't think those were ever very good. So they put in dry electrolytics in here. Arco Electronics. 20 at 450. Yeah, so this capacitor is heated up and started dripping, and it's a replacement. You can see where somebody tacked in a new one. Man, I tell you, this, I don't even want to power. This is one of the ones I don't even want to power up until I get all this stuff replaced and get some decent looking, you know, circuitry stuff in here. Yeah, this one's had a rough life, and I believe the dial cord's broke too, so it doesn't even move. Yeah, there's no dial cord in there. It just turns. Yeah, I'm always stuck with the radios that need dial cords, it seems like. Alright, well, let's start having some fun, seeing what's going on with this thing. Okay, I got that capacitor replaced. It was a 0.05 microfarad across the line capacitor that ran from the rectifier tube ground, which on this one is the chassis. So got that replaced. Have no idea if these electrolytics are any good. So that across the line cap, like it's probably shorted and basically fell apart whenever I went to move it. It just fell apart. So we got these other ones in here. They at least physically look good. We'll find out. So I'm gonna try to see if I can't fire it up and see what happens. I got it plugged in. Tube's lighting up. Some crackling from the speaker. And we have no antenna. So let's clip on a antenna. We gotta share a filter home. That sounds like all out crap. Well, let's replace the electrolytics and see what we get. Well, this is definitely a hacked up job here. Somebody hooked a wire on to the filter capacitor where it connects down in here to the rectifier tube, the 35Z5, and they patched in this wire, and then over here we've got another filter capacitor going to the audio output tube, and there's a black wire hooked here. So somebody's got the field coil, and I believe they've added it in here. So I'm thinking about taking the speaker out and just putting a standard speaker in here with the regular audio output transformer, because this is just a hack job right here. This is messed up. So I got the schematic for this radio and searches for the radio. I just put in 1939 Emerson, 1940 Emerson, and ended up with the model DB301 is the model number of this particular set. And in looking at the schematic, it does carry a speaker field coil. So this is definitely not the original speaker, but the field coil in it is the correct ohms. It's a 450 ohm field coil. So I guess we're just gonna have to keep this thing. I don't have anything around here this size with a field coil on it. I've got one slightly bigger than this one. It's probably about a 6-inch speaker, and it had a field coil on it, but it's too big and won't fit in there. I think the one that was in here was either a 4.5 or a 5-inch speaker. This one's a little bit smaller than that. I believe it's a 4-inch. So what I did was, instead of mounting the speaker with the bolts through the chassis, I turned it up this way, and I'm going to use it to mount the transformer to. I'm either going to solder this transformer to it or fabricate some screws to go in there. But I ended up drilling some holes for this speaker in the chassis with some self-tapping screws, and drilled those holes with no problem. So I got this mounted, and these screws match the original, so that should go pretty good. So I'm gonna wire the speaker back up, and we'll turn it on and see what it does. I soldered the power transformer. I flipped the speaker over because this is where they had the bolts running into the chassis. They had it turned over and had the bolts and nuts. Actually, there's only one bolt and nut on this side, and then a bolt and nut on this side that didn't really hook to anything. It was just there for support. Got the some of the capacitors replaced. Somebody had one of these Japanese capacitors here, and according to the schematic, this is supposed to be a .0022 or a .002. According to the schematic, that's what it's supposed to be, but somebody had a .02 instead of a .002. Yeah, that's one thing you really got to watch on these radios. If you're replacing capacitors, you got to pay close attention to your values. You know, you can't replace a .002 with a .02. It just won't work, you know. And so got this replaced, and that improved the volume quite a bit. I took out the paper capacitor and put this .02 in place of it temporarily until I get some more of these yellow polyester caps in. They are on order, they just, you know, aren't here yet. So I figured this would work until in the meantime, then I can put in the replacement capacitor. I did go with some smaller electrolytic capacitors, and you know, got those soldered in place. The after I figured out the field coil was a part of this set, I went back in and put the wires, you know, hooked it back up the way it was supposed to go. You know, I could run a permanent magnet speaker in it and just put a resistor in line with that, but you know, it'd have to be a 450 ohm resistor and probably at least 5 to 10 watts. You know, so it'd be a pretty bulky resistor, and I don't happen to have a 450 ohm resistor that size in stock, so we just put the original, well, it's not even original, put this speaker back in place. You know, according to the schematic, it was supposed to be 450 ohms field coil. I did ohm this one out, and it does ohm out to be 450 ohms, so at least that is correct. So otherwise, we replaced this capacitor and all the other, well, we replaced all the capacitors in here. All the paper capacitors are gone now. So the next thing to do is the dial cord. The Okay, you know how much I love to replace dial cord. It's one of my least favorite things to do on the radio, but we got the dial cord replaced. It involves taking off this dial pointer. It just pulls right off, and then you take off these two lower screws on the dial, you know, the dial itself, the dial face, and it's metal. It comes off. You just disconnect this dial light and it pops right off. And then behind here you've got this shaft here which has a pulley up under it, and it's real simple. This is one of the more simpler ones I had to do. It's not saying much. It's always a pain in the butt to replace these things, but basically it just goes around this tuning capacitor. Of course, you're gonna have to feed the dial cord up through here. You feed your dial cord up through, make sure it falls down on that wheel down in there. I don't know if you can see that or not, it's kind of dark. And you make sure you get your dial cord wrapped around this pulley at the bottom, and you're going to go up and wrap it around the tuning capacitor, and you're going to knot it twice, on each end, and you have to make sure you knot it at the right distance, so when you pull your spring it down to clip it into the wheel here, it has enough tension on it to move it. That's pretty much all there is to it. And you just put all this back together and it's pretty much ready to go. So we got that working. Now I've got one other problem with the hum with this thing, and I can't figure it out. Okay, here's our problem here, and I've been working on this for a good bit amount of hours trying to figure out what's wrong with it. I've pretty much gone through the entire radio, and I've even gone through with the signal tracer from the front end to the back end, and I just can't pin it down. It's pretty much throughout the radio, this buzzing, humming. And I've double checked to make sure the filter capacitors are installed correctly, and they are. And I've actually gone through to make sure there's no mistakes. When you hit a station, this is all you get. That's about all you get. You can hear a little music behind it. So yeah, this one kind of stumps me. I've got everything that I know pretty much. I went through and checked all the resistors. Everything looks good. There's nothing open, and all the capacitors are in place. I've tried different capacitors in different places to see if there's one that's a new one that I put in, or a replacement that I put in that's bad, and I can't track it down. So I guess I'm gonna have to see if I can track this down. Okay, I've got it playing now. And well, I figured out what the problem was, and I would have never guessed it. This thing is super picky when it comes to the antenna. You can't hook some radios I found you can hook up an external antenna by clipping it on to the loop antenna, and some radios I've seen, you can even hook an antenna right straight to the tuning capacitor, and they play fine. This one's not like that. This is super picky about its loop antenna. I had to put a huge washer here because this center part of this loop antenna broke out. Not only did I find out there was something wrong with the with this loop antenna not being connected properly. This wire was wound up over here, just wound and wound up, and it actually went here. If you hook this up any other way, you're going to get that same buzz that I just demonstrated before. You know, so if you find yourself working on one of these Emerson DB301s or something similar, and you have that problem, it's probably your loop antenna. This thing is extremely sensitive about what kind of antenna it has on it. And it does receive okay, but it's not a what I would like to call an excellent performer.
In other words, if there were no tape island.
But of course, this radio has had a really hard life, I can tell.
What the tax rate would be if there was an order.
Well, it's time to put it back in the cabinet and call this one a wrap. Okay, here we are back in the cabinet playing. Had to glue our dial face cover back on. It's got a crack in it, but I was able to get some of the yellow out of it with some plastic cleaner, but it's still pretty yellow.
Nevada's gonna matter. New Hampshire's gonna.
There's only 3 stations basically in this area anyway, so not gonna be much band scanning. Can't hook up an external antenna to this, it's too fussy. So band's a lot more active at night.
Jersey, possibly.
Far away, listeners. My wife and I are missionaries in France doing pioneer church work.
Continue Obama's failed economic.
I have to get it off the music because I had copyright crap.
The largest number of people out of the labor force that we've ever faced. 50 million Americans in poverty. 45
Here it
million
is.
Americans on food stamps. You want to continue that, or you want to continue Obamacare, or you want to replace it?
The 1939/1940 Emerson DB301 playing again after years and years.
You either want a president that's going to
Alright, thanks for watching.
fix the VA, a president that sees the need to put America first, and that means militarily,